Show, taking your business from seed to sapling to towering giant, with your hosts, best-selling author and business growth experts Noah Fleming and Shawn Veltman. This is the only show that gives you proven, pragmatic, and immediately applicable business growth strategies every week in 15 minutes or less. Here's Noah and Shawn.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back. It's another episode of the fabulous Evergreen Show. It's Noah Fleming with my co-host, Mr. Shawn Veltman. Shawn, as always, give me the weather. What's going on? Where are you?
I am in lovely Calgary, Alberta again. I'm not getting out nearly as much as I should these days. It's a beautiful day. We had some rain this morning, but look, the more important thing is that it's nice inside, and I get to talk to you today.
There you go. Well, crummy day here today, but we are going to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, something that I think our listeners will get a lot of value from, and it's this idea, and let me get your reaction here, but I've noticed that when we go into a client's and we introduce a new tool or a new process or something that starts to generate some really great results really quickly, because of course, shameless promotion, all of the things we introduce do generate great results. That was probably a bit too shameless there, Shawn. But one of the things we see is that as soon as they start to see these new things start to come to fruition, these results, these new improvements, they want more. They want more right away. It's almost this sort of adrenaline shot of, give me more, what's next? As opposed to saying, let's stick with this for a while and see how we can make this work. And one of the things you and I discussed was, one company we worked with in particular had greater insights in 2 weeks than they had had in the past 20 years. That's a pretty big deal.
It is, and I completely understand where they're coming from, because it is really exciting when you get some new insights, you get some new information, and you say, oh, and it sparks a new question, or it sparks a new line of inquiry, and you start to think, now that we're doing this, if we did that, we'd be even more successful. And if we did this thing, we'd be even more. And you want to run and jump and, start getting it done immediately. One thing about me, Noah, is I've been doing martial arts for the past 25 years or so, specifically Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and, in full contact fighting, which is just so much fun. But I see the same thing there. I see new people come in and, they saw something really cool on YouTube and they want to try it. They want to do a cartwheel flip arm bar into a choke or something.
Right. Break out the swords. We need the swords. Get out the weaponry.
How can I go from 0 to 100 immediately? Whereas, it's funny, when I train and when I practice, I spend more time on the introductory lesson. I'll spend an hour doing what's boring the new guy after 3 minutes. And I think it's just a difference in perspective that, the more advanced you get in anything, the more you understand how important the basics are.
Well, it's interesting, and your martial arts example is very close to my example, which we had discussed earlier, was this idea that I started using a Fitbit this year, something I said I never would do, because I was starting to get a little soft. I was starting to feel a little bit of extra around the belly. And so I thought, now's the time to get serious about this. But I know in the past, when I started working out, I tried to do everything at once. Like you said, going from 0 to 100 instantly. And then so I would stick with it for maybe a week. And then, of course, I'd be back to eating pizza and donuts and having Fruit Loops for breakfast. Well, I don't eat that unhealthy, but you know what I'm saying. And so I think the difference this time was I started just with the Fitbit. And I said, for 2 weeks, I'm doing nothing else. And so for us, what we do with our clients, when we introduce something, we tell them, stick with it. Don't add anything else, for 2 weeks, maybe 2 months, maybe even longer. Get the results you need there and then add something else. And I just think it's such a mistake to try and go from 0 to 100 so quickly, especially when, you've had nothing like this in the past. It's a tough line to walk, because on the one hand, you want to keep going and building on your successes, but on the other, if you try to bring too much in too quickly, you're just asking too much of everybody, whether it's yourself trying to lose weight or your company trying to change habits that have been there for years or even decades in some cases. And so, I think the weight loss is a great example there, Noah. And
It's why we're so insistent with our clients that we'll take the time, we'll make sure that everybody is doing step 1, and then we move on to step 2. We spend a lot of time talking about processes and about really unsexy topics like customer retention rather than acquisition, like about creating a process rather than hiring brilliant people and watching them be amazing, and really trying to find the ways to be consistent in success. And I think that even applies to how we do our work with clients, is that we have a process as well. And that process involves finding the most transformational, the most impactful intervention that we can do, and then only focusing on that. And only once that's in place, moving on to the next thing and the next thing. And I think, in our experience, what we've found, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is that trying to do anything else just ends up being a failure in the long term. It might make a splash. It'll definitely make people say, "Oh, that's brilliant," or "Oh, this is amazing, guys." But it won't necessarily have the impact and the end results, which is ultimately why we're there in the first place.
You said something else interesting there, was this idea of customer retention and acquisition. I get invited to a lot of these really sexy marketing events like South by Southwest and HubSpot's Inbound, and I go speak at these things, but I spend the first day or two listening to the other speakers, and it's all really sexy, exciting marketing information on how to get new customers. And I used to start these things by saying, okay, well, now I get to be the boring Canadian guy talking about the boring topics like customer retention, because this is the thing that's truly going to make a dent in your profits and your revenue this year. And suddenly people listen up, but it's the unexpected thing that they don't want to necessarily think about because they're interested in all the sexy, shiny new stuff.
Exactly. It's one truth that we all know, is that success is boring. There's an old anecdote or joke about somebody saying to a famous piano player, I'd give my life to be able to play as well as you do. And his response is, I've given my life to be able to play as well as I do.
So let's talk about this. What can our listeners do when they're faced with this challenge or they're faced with this dilemma of implementing something new and then very quickly wanting to jump to the next thing? How do we know when it's right, and how do we know when we need to slow down?
So I think there's two things that are incredibly important. The first is, don't ever lose the excitement that's causing you to want to do the next things. Don't lose those ideas. Don't lose that excitement. Write them down. Keep track of them. Revisit them every 2 weeks, every month or so, and see if it's appropriate to do them. That excitement and that attention that you're paying to it is incredibly valuable, and that will pay dividends. But the second part of this is, don't rush to get it all done immediately. Go through the list. Find the thing that is most important, and that's thing singular, and then put it into place in your organization. And depending on the size of your company, it might take 5 days, it might take 5 months before it's in place in a way that you're comfortable moving to the next. And the biggest piece of advice I can give here is, don't move on to the second thing before you're certain that the first one is working as you expect.
So, yeah, it's, again, I keep coming back to this idea of the health analogy, the Fitbit analogy, because if you've been unhealthy for 20 years, or you haven't had a process where you've done something for a long time, you've ingested Diet Cokes every morning at 7 a.m. and pizza pockets for the past 20 years every single day, you've got to do some work to get back on track. And so you can't just expect to wake up tomorrow and for everything to be perfect. So I guess, what you just said is really important. What I'm trying to think here is, what would be a great way that we could challenge our listeners today to really put this into play?
Well, what I'd say is, we've often ended podcasts by saying, pick one thing and do it. And so if any of our listeners have done that so far, I'm not going to give you new homework on this one. Keep doing the thing that you're doing. If you haven't picked one thing, obviously pick it. If you're still writing down ideas or, reading books and doing things that we see a lot of people doing where you collect dozens of ideas, keep doing that, but pick the one that you're going to do and commit to doing that until you're ready, or until you're ready to move on to the next. And I'll finish this off just by talking about, when do you know you're ready to move on to the next thing? And to me, that's when it's happening without you monitoring it. It's happening without you having to smack somebody in the head to get it. And at that point, you're ready to then move on to the next thing.
It's the idea of unconscious competency, right? Something
That's
has
exactly
become,
it.
yeah, it's become ingrained. It's part of your process. It's part of your culture now. And so I think, just to add on to that, like Shawn said, we're not going to give new homework, but think about something that maybe you've just implemented recently. Are you already thinking about wavering? Are you thinking about jumping ship? Are you thinking about pivoting? If it's not working, sometimes you might need to do that. But for the most part, stick with it. Don't add anything else to it. Stay the course. Stay focused, because success is a process. So
it's a process and it's boring.
That's right. It's a process and it's boring. So everybody, I think, Shawn, that's about our 15-minute mark there. That was a really interesting topic for me. I know I picked something up there, which is one, I certainly can't be expecting to have my Diet Coke and pizza pockets every morning, and neither can you, Shawn, so you better get off that stuff.
Theoretically, I agree with you.
Okay, everybody. So anyways, if you have any questions about this podcast, as always, feel free to get in touch with Shawn and I. Best way to do that is go to my website, noahfleming.com, hit the contact button. But as always, we hope you enjoyed this, and definitely leave us a review, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to join us each and every week for another great episode of The Evergreen Show with your hosts, Noah Fleming and Shawn Veltman. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review, and we'll catch you next time on The Evergreen Show.